This tank is by far one of the best tanks and dominates in World of Tanks console, and it is of course one of the typical tanks that everybody will work their way towards, the E75. Now the E75 is a tier 9 German heavy tank coming down the E100 line that pretty much everyone typically goes down as one of their first few tech tree lines, because you see the Tiger and everyone loves the Tiger. Of course then leading on to the Tiger 2 or the King Tiger, and then the E75 and E100. Now the E75 is one of the best tanks at its tier because of the fact that it gets this 490 alpha damage gun, which is capable of basically decimating all of your opponents, dealing hundreds and thousands of damage to your opponents over the course of the battles that you'll be playing. And essentially what you'll be able to do is just get into a nice position using the pretty decent mobility of 40 kilometers an hour, and of course having very good penetration on your standard and premium ammunition, meaning that you feel very good at being able to really dish out a ton of damage. So, what is this tank all about? Well, of course, as you would typically expect with a German vehicle, if you've been playing World of Tanks for any length of time, is it has very good armor when you do end up side scraping with this thing, since it has 120mm on the side, and when you're angling like this, for example, it becomes basically impenetrable, unless, of course, you do expose the turret, which you do have a cupola if you were to side scrape out from the right hand side and expose that cupola. But sometimes you can actually side scrape off of a kind of a building to your left if you were looking directly out, which means you can hide the cupola, and essentially the weakest part of this tank becomes then the kind of turret, or catching the side of the turret in this thing. But overall armor works pretty well, and although it does have a big lower plate which everyone goes for and can basically pen quite easily, when you're wiggling and moving like this and with the accuracy in the game, you can occasionally bounce quite a few rounds even when they're going for that lower plate. And remember, when you're dealing 490 alpha damage back to your opponents, you can pretty much trade with almost every tank in the game, bar like the super high alpha tanks, things like tank destroyers at tier 10 and even some at tier 9, things like the Object 704 and that sort of tanks you can't trade with, but basically everything else, and even most of the heavy tanks that you'll come up against will have lower or similar alpha. And I mean, look at the Maushan, for example, 440 compared to the 490 on the VKB, but then you go to the Americans and you start looking and finding yourself at 400 alpha and stuff like that. So this tank very nice indeed with the alpha. And of course then we can have a look at the in-depth statistics, where you can see the accuracy of 0.36, it gets 8 degrees of gun depression, making this thing feel really nice in the game. The aim time is quite long, but you know, it's not awful for the alpha that this thing has. 40 kilometers an hour is actually quite good because it maintains that speed relatively well. It's not super sluggish. You then have 2,171 damage per minute, which isn't the best, and if you really wanted the highest damage per minute, you'd take the small gun, but I mean, it's just not worth it using the small gun on this thing. And so always take the big gun, in my opinion, as you can basically out-trade and just be a nuisance to opponents and just hide and use your kind of trading that you can do with this tank to make this tank work properly. You then have a decent hull rotation speed, which is okay, nothing crazy, but I mean, it's decent enough. And you've also then got a pretty okay reload. It doesn't feel too long, it doesn't feel short, but I mean, it's up there with, you know, typical tanks with this sort of alpha. So overall, tank is very good, and it plays so much better in game. So I think we'll jump into some gameplay to show off what you can do with this tank. Of course, we've ran it with advanced loader, advanced optics for a bit of view range, and a gun stabilizer for the accuracy. You could potentially take advanced powertrain, as I always say, or alternatively the traction system for extra speed, but it's probably worth the advanced powertrain out of the two of them, because you want that max horsepower to be improved to get up to top speed quicker and maintain your speed a little bit easier than just the actual max speed going up, since it's probably not going to be that is limiting you to be able to go fast or a decent speed. Or you could pick ventilation It's really down to you and how you want to set up this tank, but there's a few options there for you. And of course that's really down to what you would, but the key ones is make sure you get the gun stabilizer and advanced loader, and then whether you take optics is down to you and your own personal play style. But I like having the optics to get extra spotting and essentially be able to get some assistance potentially in my game. So let's jump into the games now and see how it fares. Now then, the first game that we have is on Pearl River, and this is one of the maps that I really enjoy when you are playing in a heavy tank, because you feel like you really impact the game, as this is quite a good one for heavy vehicles because you have a lot of opportunities to mobilize around the map without being exposed to too many tank destroyers and artillery pieces, which is always nice as they are usually the downfall of most heavy tanks. So we're going to see how we can fare, and in fact usually I would go over to the northeast of the map in B8 and 9, as this is one of the key areas that heavies need to take, but we are deciding to try and mix it up in my games, as sometimes you can get bored, you can get frustrated, and you know, sometimes it's nice to go in somewhere different. I'm going to see what we can do to some of the medium tanks who typically push the middle. Now, pushing over here is not necessarily the best thing that you can possibly do, as artillery can hit you. Tank destroyers will often be sat in the location opposite, but we're going to go over here and see if we can trade with some of these mediums and other heavy tanks that might have made their way in. Now, we find ourselves up against one of our lower tier boys, which is the Tiger 2 there, and of course we really basically don't bounce against the Tiger 2, to be honest with you. The penetration of these APCR rounds is unbelievable. We are using quite a few premium rounds in this video because we want to go for the 4th mark on this thing, as we're pretty close. I think we're at like 98% or something like that, so really trying to min-max this tank and the AP of this vehicle. There's literally no reason why I wouldn't just use all of it, because it is just advantageous to do so. So what we do here is we start angling slightly, and that allows us to bounce the T-34, which is always nice. And now we can push towards him, try and get a bit of damage, and there you go, a free little 499 damage roll there on this guy, picking up just over 1600 damage, which is quite nice at the beginning of the game considering it's 2 minutes in. And there we go, we pick up our first, well, second kill of the game even. God, I'm underestimating my own power within this game. Apologies, that's awful. Anyway, the Jagdtiger 88 is of course out in the open, which is never a good sign when you're coming up against a tank with 490 alpha. And that allows us to basically get a few free shots into this Jagdtiger. There's someone behind me trying to push into me. I don't quite know what was going on here, but we get a few more shots there, as the T-32 apparently was the one pushing me. I have no idea why. But anyway, we now move over to the other side of the flank, or decide where we want to go from here, as the game is looking like we're going to win. It's one of those crushing victories where, yeah, I mean, opponents just ain't looking too hot right now. So with 2,700 damage done, and with quite a few opponents still left alive, but probably in their base, we want to get forward as quickly as possible, use that speed that this tank has, and hopefully hit the T-30 on the move. Yeah, snapshotting with this tank, it's quite good, and not only do we snapshot, but we actually track the T-30, which allows us to get a little bit of assist, and then of course we bounce off the side of the IS-3, not aiming 100%, ending up hitting the kind of spaced armor that it gets on the side, which is not always very fun, but we do manage to finally pick up some damage on the IS-3, who is of course overextending to try and get a shot into our teammate there. So nice to see, and that allows us to go over 3,000 damage this game. But as you saw there, artillery is looking our way, and yeah, and what did I say about this map not having too many opportunities for artillery to hit you? But apparently they do. Now, there are 3 vehicles behind me, and I noticed this, and of course there's only one teammate over here, make that no teammates behind me, to deal with these guys. So given that they are on fairly low amounts of hit points, we're feeling pretty confident that we can go over and at least deal quite a bit of damage if we can avoid getting hit from the RT in the back, because they can hit you here. Hint, hint. But, you know, with this game being kind of slightly even at the minute, we've got to really start dealing with some of these guys. So we managed to hit the projector there, which is nice. There is a tank that's going to be able to come up directly in front of us, but we find ourselves a little E75 who flicks us but doesn't pen, which is good. And then we only track the E75. enemy artillery loves us right now and is going again for us. But we are not able to spot this E75 unless he pulls back, of course, which I preemptively throw a shot into the ground. That was a bad mistake by me, as we would have been able to deal with that guy pretty easily. The E75T obviously feeling very confident in his ability to try and take us out here, that he gifts us a free shot of damage, and now it's just a case of trying to deal with this E75. I'm trying to avoid getting hit by the artillery piece. We put one into him on the move, and of course a typical German high roll there for 588. But we have done 4,500 damage. We've also picked up 5 enemies within this game, which is always brilliant, and that's what you want when you're coming up against some of these big boys on the enemy team. But with 3 tank destroyers left alive, it is not looking good with only 433 hit points. We made some bad trades at the end, or at this last stages of this game, against that E75 and of course against the MX65T, where we lost quite a bit of hit points that we unnecessarily didn't need to lose. So yeah, I did play maybe bad towards the end of this game, but we still pick up 4.5k, and there's still plenty more damage that could potentially come our way. Now what I do here is I actually take a long way around. We go all the way over, heading horizontally instead of just directly going over to the bridge area straight ahead of me, and that's because we don't want to get spotted by anyone, and if we do get spotted it could be pretty bad. So coming over to this location, you can knock down this tree and you can also knock down this tree, and that provides a little bit of cover. Now are you going to get spotted if anyone pushes from the right? Yes, because the cap circle where the enemies can go, there aren't any bushes between me and that cap circle. But considering that the T30 was the one left alive and there's someone directly in front, you've got that case of where you might be able to deal a little bit of damage to it if we can catch out this T30. So I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for someone on the team to spot or for an enemy to make a misplay. And I know that there's a Borsig in this game, or a Waffle or something with high alpha that can finish us off, and I'm expecting them to be directly in this bush ahead of me, as this is where they were, I believe, where they were last spotted, and it apparently is the J Panther is what I was thinking of. But there's still a T95 that's lingering somewhere in the background, so I want to make sure that we don't get pumped by him. So just sitting down, waiting for someone, and hopefully someone on the team will push. I was expecting that someone on the southern side of the map would start making a bit of an aggressive push over. The enemy TD does get spotted, but I'm just kind of wary of just pushing out to try and get a shot on this T95, and we can't even get one anyway, so we're just waiting at this point to see what happens and what happens to this T95, because we don't want to YOLO in. We're going to get taken out quite quickly, and this is the problem that you see with a lot of tanks, a lot of heavy tank players, is that they'll YOLO in at the end of the game and they'll lose all of their hit points, and then they might even end up losing the game. So we don't want to do that. We want to be quite conservative given our hit points. So we're waiting now, see what's going to come out, and that's what you want to do in your heavies at this point. The T30 then appears. We put one into the side of the turret, which is good, but it wasn't him that was spotting us. It was actually what appears to be this J Panther 2, who might have pushed forward just a little bit to be able to spot us round, and of course the T30 would have had about 1 million bushes in between me and him. We don't manage to get the final shot on this T30, which means we aren't going to be able to pick up a top gun, or at least that's what it looks like. But there is an artillery piece lingering around, so maybe we can get one. Maybe. And that is a very, very maybe type thing. But with the enemy artillery piece in the base, can we get one into the side of him? Yes, we can. 648 with those HE rounds, and this is where the HE rounds feel amazing. The GW Tiger P, obviously side on. Can we get one more into him? Yes, we can, and there we go. The top gun is secured with just over 6,000 damage as well. But maybe we can get another shot into this T95 if our teammates kind of bottle it and don't end up managing to pen this guy. Now, there are 2 tank destroyers with long reloads here, and only one of them has managed to pen so far. The T30 looks like he's going for the T95. The T95's fired, so it's quite safe to push up. Can we get the shot? Can we get it? Can we go into the cupola? We fully aim, and then of course it hits the upper left, which of course is at a ridiculous angle, and it auto ricochets and we don't get the final damaging hit there. But we do pick up 6,000 damage, which is not a bad result, and when you're going for your 100% marks of excellence, it is not a bad result at all, with 1926 base experience, 6 enemies taken out, 6,034 damage with 2,000 blocks, 626 assisted, and yeah, not a bad result at all, and we only lost 10,000 silver for that result. Yes. Firing premium in this thing is very expensive, and there you go, 96.81% at this point in the grind with a mastery badge, top gun, blah blah blah. So straight into the next one then, and we'll see a bit more. And in this replay there is something a little bit different, because we're going to be playing this tank like a scout. Yeah, a scout. Anyway, the E75 is of course pretty good at being able to take a few hits, so you can bounce quite a few rounds, but you also have the view range to kind of back it up, in which, yes, you are probably going to get outspotted, but as soon as the enemy tank fires, you have decent enough view range to spot them back. So what we're hoping here is to be able to make an aggressive push over to this side, as well as use the alpha damage that we do have to get a few snipes in at the beginning of the game, use the 8 degrees of gun depression that we do get in this tank to get a few damaging hits. And there we go for the T32, badly aimed shot. We were aiming way too low, to the point where we were going to actually go through the tracks into the ground behind, not the actual hull armor behind him. But we do manage to get that final first shot in there to the side, and actually through the frontal drive wheel as well, so we probably would have trapped him if we didn't pen anyway. So a nice little start, but this game is it's an interesting one, because it's not particularly exactly what I was expecting. I was expecting a few more tanks to actually make their way across over to this area. There's a lot of tanks that usually go into the town, and generally I would accept that most heavies should go into the town, but apparently in this game I decided not to, and it didn't end up too badly. But we put one into the AMX65T, who for some reason was sat out in the middle of the open in their base. Don't quite know why people sit there, as it's just not good, and often if you want to go over that side, I would recommend going over to the town, as when you're on that spawn it is just way better, and as soon as you get spotted over on their side from directly in front here, you just get pumped by like genuinely like 5 or 6 tanks who can easily see you, so just avoid doing that. Now when I'm pushing up here, this is the kind of aggressive push that we want to do. There's a few tanks that are pushing up in front of me, and hopefully they can get a little bit of damage as we move forward. And if we can do that, then you know, we're going to be able to maybe get a bit of spotting damage, as well as pick off a few opponents as we push forward, and that allows us to get some shots that we might be able to take against some of these boys. But with the Jaegeru up in the hill area, which is usually the camping TD spot, we got to be a little bit careful. We don't want to get Jaegeru'd in this game. Yeah, we don't want to get Jaegeru'd in this game. But whether that does come true, I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But when we have 1920 hit points, you can take a Jaegeru hit if you need to. Obviously, you don't want to be taking too many hits like that, as it's not very friendly to your hit point pool. But we do manage to find ourselves a little chieftain and get a free shot into him, which is good. The chieftain can be a real nuisance on a ridgeline, and we all know about these kind of British tanks. I wasn't sure whether I'd be able to get a hit in there. Apparently his hull is actually hidden by the slope, so not sure. But we pull back now, as I'm a little bit scared. There is an artillery piece that could potentially get a little cheeky shot into us, and trust me, when they see an E75 they usually go for these big German boys. Which is never fun, but the artillery is spotted now, so hopefully he doesn't YOLO too hard. We then miss our shot on the chieftain there. Could have got a free shot, but unfortunately weren't aimed 100%. But the tortoise is thinking he's funny, but we're a little bit funnier, and we deal 511 into that cupola of that guy. So with the bar now also coming over to this side, maybe we can get one into him. I'm happy to take a hit from the chieftain, and then of course we bounce, and then the bar turns around. Fuming. But with a lot of our teammates over this side actually being taken out, and with 90% of our team still within about 5 squares of each other, yeah, it's not looking too good, and by the looks of things, people aren't even going to be able to hit anyone that decides to YOLO me over here, as they are kind of in the weirdest spot in the history of man, in like F4 and 5. I don't know why people push down there. It's a terrible position to push down into, because as soon as you get spotted, you are lit up for absolutely everyone, and you're about to see what happens to that TD over to the right. He gets hit by nice little 400 roll. Then you're seeing just damage popping up and damage being taken everywhere. So with that being said, what we try and do is at least try and spot the people on the hill to avoid them from just being able to sit there and farm up our teammates, and also maybe we can get a few shots into the boys that are going to be pushing our base, because I don't want to be capped out, because I've been having way too many of the capping games in this one, and we all know how being capped out when you're trying to get damage and trying to go for your marks of excellence is the biggest pain in the backside. But with 1,800 damage, it is a very mediocre game, especially when you're going for 4 marks. Yeah, you basically need like 4k, 5k to even go up at any level, like combined damage that is. And we're getting pumped by an autoloader who's obviously hidden, probably a TVP or something like that, maybe something else entirely, maybe a bat chat or something like that. Or maybe it's even a heavy tank. Never know. Either way, what we're doing here is trying to avoid getting hit. And then, oh, for God's sake, what are you doing, Tortoise? Why have you YOLO'd in? And then, oh dear, I feel bad for the Tortoise there, as we managed to get him taken out pretty quick by our teammates, who are actually sitting back in a position to actually cover us here, which is surprising. It's not usual that you actually get teammates who hit the people you spot. That may or may not happen as we go on in the game, but at least it happened there. But with this amount of damage done, uh-oh, there's a bar that's about to YOLO in. Oh, please don't pen me, please don't pen me. He misses, and now he's really screwed. Bye-bye. Little bit of assistance on that guy, also picking up 2,800 damage, and there is still plenty more damage to be had. We probably wouldn't go down on our marks of excellence with a game like this, so we're pretty happy with how it's going. I want to win the game though, obviously, and so I decide to push over to the left hand side and see if we can find our way into a nicer position. And oh, for God's sake, what is this? The Jaeger then comes in, he bounces off of the side. I have no idea how he bounces off of the side, but apparently he does. And then, yeah, we can't really get a shot into him. And then the Chieftain Mark 6 decides to YOLO through the middle of the open field. Brilliant idea. Not quite sure that that was what he was expecting, but apparently he hits us on the move over the field, going over bumps. So, yeah, thank you game. But we pick up 6,800 combined damage, which is not awful. And you can see that you can get a little bit of assistance. Granted, you know, we're quite far up, and I was hoping that our teammates would be able to support a little bit more. We got a little bit lucky. I say a lot lucky, actually, against the Jaeger. And we didn't actually get penned in the end, so that's always a nice little one. But overall, pretty happy with how it went. But if I was a teammate, I would not be sitting in the middle of the map. And if I was a Murat, I certainly wouldn't be still in base, as I'd want to be pushing forward to try and get a bit of spotting damage on all of the boys that are going to be pushing from the enemy team. But you never know. Maybe he'll be able to win the game for us. But other than that, that is the E75, or at least my experience of it. It can be amazing. It can be a little bit tedious if you do find yourself up against heat spammers. And remember, Tyrans and stuff like that in the game. Yeah, it can be horrible, but at the end of the day, that's basically every tank in the game, and we'll see how it goes either way. So let me know what you guys think of the entire E100 line, as well as the E75 if you have played it, and hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you want to see any specific tank, let me know in the comments, as well, as I'll be working through a load of different tanks in the upcoming videos, and we've got some Halloween ones to showcase to you guys, so I'll join you there, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Goodbye.